Naš naredni gost je Braiker, editor Ad Age-a. Pričat će nam o industrijski definisanim usponima o brendovima koji zauzimaju stavove, a sve sa ciljem istraživanja kako agencija budućnosti izgleda. A sve to u predavanju koje nosi naziv The View from the Trenches. Mr. Braiker, please join me on the stage. Može, aplauz.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'll let you guys settle down. Who's familiar with Ad Age magazine? We're a business media brand in the States. We cover advertising agencies, marketers, CMOs. A lot of what some of what I'm going to say is going to sound familiar to you, especially given what Daniel's talk covered was very interesting and great. But I'm going to give a brief overview of the way I see things in the advertising industry and the marketing space and how they interact and make a case ultimately for creativity and for brand. And we'll take it from there. I've been the editor of Ad Age now for 2 years. It was 2 years ago. Last month was my anniversary. And the advertising landscape looks noticeably different today than it did from when I took over, and it's continuing to change at an incredibly rapid pace. 2 years ago, when I worked on my first issue of the magazine, Sir Martin Sorrell still held the reins at WPP. His nemesis, Maurice Lévy, was still at Publicis. They've both moved on, as we've seen. The Me Too movement had yet to come to advertising shores. This is the female empowerment and accountability movement. Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, all the massive data breaches had yet to occur. It's been a very busy 2 years. And then there are the consultancies, as we've seen. This year, 5 consultancies cracked our top 10 list of the world's largest advertising companies. Here they are. These are the 10 biggest advertising companies in the world, and all of the bottom, well, from Accenture on down, we're talking about consultancies in the agency space. Meanwhile, investors have taken note. Publicis saw its stock sink to multi-year low last month. It's since rebounded a little bit. Accenture, on the other hand, have reached an all-time high. Right now, things are changing faster than they ever have before, and right now, things are also the slowest that they are ever going to be. Last month, we learned that Accenture, the world's largest consultancy, bought Droga 5, one of the best-known U.S. independent creative agencies. So where they don't have the creative chops, they're trying to buy their way in. Do they pose a threat? Well, we'll see. Certainly seems that way. The previous, so that was last month. The month before that, U.S. Stagwell Group made a $100 million investment in MDC Partners, home to world-class agencies like Anomaly, which we'll talk about, 72 and Sunny. The very notion of what an agency is being constantly reiterated, redefined. Even the oldest, most iconic names are morphing. They're disappearing in some cases. Mark Reed took Sir Martin's job at the helm of WPP last year and is already shaking things up. J. Walter Thompson, which is an advertising agency that dates back to the Abraham Lincoln administration, is gone. It's been renamed and turned into something called Wunderman Thompson. Young and Rubicam, which dates to the 1920s, is gone. It's been merged by WPP into a digital-centric thing called VMLY&R. We're still not sure if we should pronounce that familiar or not. So what's going on here? Today I'm going to break down a few of these industry-defining headwinds. We'll try to land on a hopeful note with an exploration of what the agency of the future is increasingly looking like, or what at least should look like. And we're going to take a look at what we're seeing bubble up across the landscape. So agencies are being squeezed on all sides. It's not just the consultancies. It's Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, Amazon. It's FANG gobbling up the majority of every incremental digital ad dollar. It's brands bringing capabilities in-house. It's clients cutting back their spend or pushing for lower fees or threatening review. It's the talent drain to higher paying jobs and stock options in the tech sector. It's a lack of trust. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation is conducting an ongoing investigation into media buying practices. I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few bombshells in the next year. We're certainly pulling on a few strings in our newsroom. It's the holding companies under continued pressure to meet their numbers, which puts pressure on agencies who are in turn forced to cut back. And where do they cut? They cut on creativity, they cut on the work. The work suffers. What else is the typical agency response to these pressures? Downsize, fire expensive senior executives, put the core agency duties in the hands of junior, less experienced employees. So it's no wonder things are not looking so great. So when they come under fire from outside forces, agencies are liquidating the very assets that they need in order to compete and in order to differentiate. And this is coming as brands themselves are under increased phenomenal pressure to navigate a fragmented media landscape, and in many cases their own brand stagnation. Let's take a look at Procter & Gamble. We're all familiar with Procter & Gamble until Samsung overtook it, was the world's largest advertiser behind, now it's the second behind Samsung. It's been working to, quote, reinvent its agency relationships with the stated purpose of putting a focus back on creativity. Last February, P&G, which is home to companies like Tide, brands like Tide, Charmin, Crest, Dawn, I think it's Ariel here in Serbia, announced plans to reduce agency spending by $400 million through July 2021. That came after a combined $750 million in similar savings over the past 3 fiscal years. The process has involved cutting the number of agencies that P&G works with by 80% from the original base in 2015. Think about that. This is the world's second largest advertiser, cutting the number of agencies it works with by 80%. In moving from a fixed retainer model to a mix of retainers and project-based work, P&G has seen a decrease in agency and production fees from $2 billion in 2015 to about half that. And what do you think this has done to P&G's bottom line? Nothing. P&G is performing better as a company. Last month, the company reported its strongest quarterly growth in sales in 8 years. Its stock reached an all-time high. So who needs agencies? Meanwhile, Unilever is the 4th largest global ad spender and home to Dove, Axe, Hellmann's, and others. It has also been cutting out agencies in part by reducing the number of traditional ads it makes and by bringing more and more creative in-house. In 2017 alone, Unilever improved its operating margin by about 1/6%, which doesn't sound like much, but it amounts to $400 million. So if that's what's happening at the world's biggest brands, you can only imagine the effect on their agencies. We're seeing, as a result, a trend towards rebundling of services in the agency landscape, and we're seeing independent agencies having more of a moment, which makes sense. When agencies are smaller and independent, they can move quickly, change course, and better address their clients' needs. We're seeing some agencies themselves getting into the brand transformation business, which is essentially consulting. This is a big agency buzzword that we're hearing a lot of. Publicis mentioned transformation 33 times in its fourth quarter earnings release. So everyone is swimming in each other's lanes. Consultancies are agencies now, agencies are consulting now, everybody's doing PR. So who wins? I think that agencies that can differentiate on their core offerings will stand out, and I think that agencies that can prove real ROI will succeed. So we're going to take a look at some bright spots. Last month, we released our annual list of the world's, of the top agencies. Our annual A-list gala was held in New York City, and together, these 10 agencies provide a blueprint as to what is working and a few glimpses at what we hope to see more of in this space. Topping the list for the second year in a row is Wieden & Kennedy. Are you guys familiar with Wieden & Kennedy? It's an independent agency headquartered far away from New York City in Madison Avenue. It's on the west coast of the United States in Portland, Oregon. This is an agency that thrives when competing against big holding companies. Some in the agency space were surprised last year, for instance, when Wieden won a major piece of the Ford account, which had been at WPP for many years. Wieden is ready, though. Within the last year, it completed culturally relevant work for brands like OkCupid, which is a dating site, fast food chain KFC, Bud Light, the top-selling beer, unfortunately, in the US. But Weiden's best-known campaign of 2018 was for Nike. Nike took a calculated risk and firmly aligned with Colin Kaepernick, Are we familiar with the story of Colin Kaepernick and Nike here in Serbia? Colin Kaepernick is a former quarterback for the NFL's San Francisco 49ers. He has, over the past couple of years, been kneeling or taking a knee during the United States for the American anthem, national anthem, before games to protest police brutality against minorities and people of color. It's deeply, deeply divisive move, split right down political lines, and it's generally a space where brands will stay far away from. They don't want to get involved. But he tweeted out last year, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. The tweet was part of Nike's 30th anniversary of its Just Do It campaign, and it was followed by Dream Crazy, a 2-minute commercial featuring Kaepernick, Serena Williams, and others. And it was brilliant. It was brilliant work. Some fans were livid. Some fans, I think I have the video, but my speech is long enough. I'll show it to you later if you want to see it. Some fans were not happy. Some trolls flooded social media, filled their accounts with videos of shoes on fire, burning their Nike gear. But many others, particularly millennials and minorities, and other folks on the right side of history, voted with their wallets. Nike saw a 31% spike in online sales in 3 days after Kaepernick's tweet. Nike's share price rose 18% in 2018. When a brand can authentically align itself with a progressive cause in a way that feels organic and true to that brand, I think there's a clear lane for that brand and that agency to succeed. We've seen this with a lot of brands, actually. We've seen this with brands like outdoor apparel company Patagonia. This is a company that makes fleece jackets. Its mission statement is to save the planet. We see this with brands like Chobani, which is a yogurt brand. Its founder is a Turkish immigrant who is outspoken in defense of refugee rights. There is, of course, tremendous potential to backfire. When Procter & Gamble's Gillette took a stand against toxic masculinity by flipping its Best a Man Can Get campaign, it didn't work. It was ham-fisted, it was opportunistic, it was inauthentic, it was a gimmick. It was a campaign, not a core value. Don't even get me started on Pepsi and Kendall Jenner, which is a huge flop. This is Procter & Gamble trying to get in on a conversation that it doesn't really belong in. Another agency that we singled out on our A list is, for several times, but this year as well, is an agency called Anomaly, part of the MDC holding company. I don't know if we're familiar with Anomaly, but there are two things about this agency that I particularly find interesting and would love to see more of. As part of its core business, Anomaly offers first consulting services and also product development and intellectual property development. In 2016, Anomaly launched Humboldt, which it has since renamed Dosist. This is a cannabis company. Vape pens that are designed to and marketed as delivering specific health-centric benefits. Do you have anxiety? Do you have trouble sleeping? Do you have aches and pains? This is what Anomaly is offering you. In 2018, Dosist expanded into Canada, where marijuana is legal across the country, and announced a launch in Florida. So let's think about this. This is an advertising agency with clients like Diageo, AB InBev, Budweiser, Google, a restaurant chain, a bank. It launched its own consumer-facing cannabis company. Marijuana. This is an industry that is expected to see $16.9 billion in global annual sales this year and is in aggressive growth mode, an estimated 38% year over year. If you're an agency, this is what innovation looks like. Anomaly projected $120 million in revenue for 2018. That's up 20% year over year. And here's what's really interesting. A look at the breakdown of that revenue goes some distance in explaining what makes Anomaly so anomalous. Advertising accounted for 30% of Anomaly's revenue. This is an agency. Advertising only made up a third of its revenue. The rest, digital, social, and mobile, accounted for another third, 30%. Experiential accounted for 5%. And other, the category other, accounted for 35%, the biggest slice of the pie. Under other, clients can find capabilities including business strategy, consulting, and here's that buzzword again, digital transformation. So I can't see into the future, and I would be a lot richer if I could. But these are a few things I expect to see some more of. I see investment in technology, marrying that technology and especially data with creativity. You can't have one without the other. And the agencies that do the best have creative at their core, but also understand the real business challenges and opportunities facing their clients. I spoke with the CMO of Ally, which is a bank, digital bank in the States. Anomaly is one of is their agency, and they won against other agencies like Wyden, like 72 and SETI. And the CMO of Ally said the reason we went with them is that they understand the core business challenges that we're facing. They understand what we are as a business, and they have the creativity and the creative chops to help us solve those problems. So I can't see into the future, but I do have experience with the present, and here's what we know. US agency growth is slowing. It's still growing, but it's slowing. US agencies grew 1.7% last year. And that's the weakest growth since the end of the recession 10 years ago. Digital revenue, meanwhile, increased 7.2%. So that's a bright spot, and obviously something that agencies are going to need to pay attention to. There are other more ominous signs out there. The US is in a trade war with China. That's not helping. There's been a lot of political uncertainty when it comes to our current leadership. The US economic expansion, assuming it holds, will pass the 10-year mark in July. That's 10 years of growth, making this the nation's longest expansion on record since the recession. The last I checked, though, the laws of gravity still apply. What goes up will eventually come down. But I want to end on an optimistic note. The most resilient ad agencies have, over the past 75 years, navigated tectonic shifts in technology before. Shifts from magazines to radio, from radio to TV, TV to VCRs, to DVRs, and now the internet. So great agency brands, like great media brands, can thrive over time if they're nimble, if they are adaptive, and they can read the tea leaves. We're seeing this at Disney is evolving right in front of our very eyes. And we see this with agencies like McCann. McCann was a top agency on our list in 1945. And it was a top agency in our list in 2018 and in 2019. Most recently, it received global headlines for the Fearless Girl work. I don't know if you're familiar with Fearless Girl, but it's a bronze statue that was put right in front of the Wall Street charging bull in Manhattan. And tourists come and take pictures with her. And she's an ad. Most people didn't realize she's an ad for a financial services company. That's what innovation looks like. As an industry, we like to talk a lot, probably too much, about how advertising creates culture. More often than not, it borrows from culture, if not outright steals from it. We like to talk a lot about how advertising can make a difference, but we've seen with brands taking a stand, it can, but it can also backfire. Still, this year's work by McCann did a little bit of both. After a shooting massacre at a high school in Parkland, Florida, the agency teamed up with students to address the problem of gun violence with The Most Vicious Cycle. It's a video starring pop singer Kesha as part of a Price on Our Lives effort. It was aimed at getting out the US midterm election vote in last November, and the US midterm election vote last November changed the face of our government. So let's reflect. From McCann to Anomaly to Wyden, what does the creative work I've mentioned so far today have in common? It has one clear, timeless, bold idea, and I sincerely believe that there's a place for agencies that can help brands and marketers stand out with the truth well told, to borrow McCann's slogan. I'll leave you with a quote from, this is the work that they did with McCann did with the endangered species. They took Lacoste, the classic alligator logo, and they swapped out the logo with actual endangered animals. That's what innovation looks like. So I'm going to leave you with a quote. Lee Clowes, the mind behind ads like Apple's Think Different, ads like Adidas Impossible is Nothing. He spoke with Ad Age earlier this year, right before he announced his retirement after 50 years at TBWA and Chiat Day. Here's what he told us. What's throwing our industry for a loop is the complexity of putting messages out there in the world with all these new tools and all this new technology. A search for simplicity and pure ideas is the only route back to making it more fun again. More than ever, finding brave, different ideas has to be the goal. So of course, the industry has problems. What else is new? But there's an absolute opportunity for any agency, independent or part of a big holding company like McCann, a new agency or one of the oldest, small or large, to stand out. There's an opportunity for brands and brand marketers to stand out. This is a fundamentally creative business, so be creative. That's what I got. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Yeah, we have some questions.
Yeah.
Now it's time for a slide of questions. Let's see. Does this mean that the future of digital agencies will be more creative-minded and customer-focused as opposed to metric-minded model?
I think it's all of the above. I think the agencies that can figure out how to do all and combine all with creative at the core will do well. But yeah, it's not an either-or question. It's yes.
It's a yes. Okay. Okay, do we have another question? I believe there was another one. Or maybe that was for Polaris. No. There was a question about the size of the screen, but it's because of the presentations. So they say that from the middle they cannot see all the figures.
Yeah, I put too much stuff on my slide. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
All right.
Okay, it's a yes. Thank you.